In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful Podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Justice cannot be for one side alone, but must be for both. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin. Today we're diving into the reality of defending the accused, the challenges within Canada justice systems, and how criminal law shapes lives and society. Our guest today is Daniela Velandia, a criminal lawyer and co-founder of Velandia Pouyes Avocats, based in Montreal. Daniela has built a career around ensuring that every accused person has a voice and a fair defense within the justice system. Our work brings a vital perspective to how society treats those on trial, challenging us to reflect on fairness, human dignity, and the deeper role of law in shaping communities. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let everyone know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your support helps more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Miss Daniela Velandia, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me, Sam. I'm doing really great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to see you. I actually know you from my sister, of all people, which obviously we shout out and we love very, very much.
Mm-hmm.
And to kick us off, please tell us more about Velandia Pouyes Avocats.
Yes, for sure. So we are a young law firm, criminal law firm. We are the defense. We are in Rosemère, so we cover a lot of territory. Something people don't know is that criminal defense lawyers go all over the place. We don't stay in a specific district. So we mainly do that. We also represent young delinquents, not only adults. And we do a little bit of immigration, so asylum seekers. And I mean, I do speak Spanish. My partner speaks actually, I don't even know the name of he's from Haiti, so he speaks that language, and we're able to serve more people, so we're very happy about that.
Very nice, very nice. I want to come back to the very origin, obviously, of all of this with some of your early aspirations and I suppose the path to criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to come from pretty humble beginning, perhaps, and obviously standing up in courts and your journey perhaps within this profession has been, I suppose, marked by determination and just a steep learning curve as well. I actually have a quote directly from you, which is, first time I ever appeared in court, a disaster. First time I did a trial, a disaster. First year as an independent lawyer, extremely challenging. I am always afraid of first, but the second or third, I feel more comfortable. And that's, I think, the essence of any business, right? Our audience is mainly composed of business owners, and the first time doing anything is always the hardest one. I think it was Lao Tzu actually talking about the fact that a journey to 1,000 miles basically begins with a single steps, right? So I'm really interested, perhaps looking back, what sparked, I suppose, you to choose criminal law, and how did those early basically years of challenge, perhaps, and first, if you will, shape basically the defense lawyer you are today?
Yeah, so you are right. I had humble beginnings. I'm actually a refugee from Colombia. I came to Canada in 2003. But the law has always been present in my life because my mom is a lawyer herself. So I have always been inspired by her, but I never really knew I wanted to be a lawyer specifically. But, when I was young, I would watch like CSI and like all that stuff that was related to criminal law. And I thought, I want to be like something with the police or like, something with criminality. And my mom just really gave me the idea. She's like, why don't you become a criminal lawyer? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess. And so even though I came to Canada, I came to Quebec when I was 9. I lived in Sherbrooke first. That's where I learned French. And then after a few years, my parents moved us to Calgary, where I learned English. And it was really in Calgary when I was 15 years old that my first I met my first ever defense attorney lawyer. She was a volunteer, and her name is Casey Fagan. She's actually really popular in Alberta. And I was very mesmerized by who she was and how she acted. Because I'm not gonna lie, there's not a lot of women in the defense side of criminal law. It's mostly men, and the prosecutors are mostly women, because the clientele that we have is not easy to deal with. So you have to have thick skin. So anyway, long story short, did a first degree in political science, and I did my degree in criminal and just law, like Bachelor of Laws, and I kept on going to become a criminal lawyer. So when you study law here, you need to go to bar school, obviously. And so I did a 6 months internship in Saint Jérôme, which is a city nearby with really it's a small law firm, but with 30 years plus of experience, and that's where I learned the craft. And then quickly I realized that I had the entrepreneur kind of desire of starting my own business. And yes, Sam, I want to reiterate my quotes. First times, completely challenging, scary, especially because I do look young for my age. And when you want to hire a criminal defense attorney, everyone has this idea of like this really tough, rough guy, you know? And I'm here with my little voice, and I'm like, yes, I'm willing to defend you. So I had to fake it till I make it, because confidence is something people really demand in this profession.
Beautiful. Yeah, just like Nike say, perhaps just do it, right? And
Exactly, just do it.
you just do it. Now you have nearly 300 basically cases under your belt, which obviously congratulations. Um, from your perspective, what are the most important traits and value to have as a criminal lawyer now that you have all this experience?
To be honest, I didn't mention it before, but having thick skin. This is the people that we deal with are marginalized people most of the time, right? So people that have drug abuse issues, people that have mental health issues. Most of my clientele is first offenders. So it's pretty much people like you and me that made a mistake and are now in front of the courts. But some of them are people that are always in the system, go back to prison, come out, and it's a vicious cycle. So I do think that there is a psychology side to it that unfortunately is not taught to us during our training. And it's something that I think should come from within you, or you won't last very long. So thick skin, trying to understand, like have the most empathy possible while also having boundaries for yourself. And honestly, what I realize also is that the older you get in this profession, sorry, like the older lawyers, they don't update themselves. Bless you, Sam. They don't update their knowledge. And I think that's something that me and Maître Pouyes are very proud of. Like we're constantly looking at new case law and trying to understand new ways to like defend our clients.
Very nice. So how many years were you a lawyer perhaps before launching that partnership?
Only 1 year. But in that
Wow.
1 year, I was able to learn a lot about how to manage a law firm, since it was their law firm. So where I used to work at was such a small one that they allowed me to see many aspects of it.
Very nice, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about obviously about building this Velandia and Pouyes, and I suppose the partnership and the mission behind it. Obviously, you after you earn basically your strides under that seasoned attorneys that you were mentioning, perhaps you find this company very quickly, which I think especially as somebody that you say openly that are afraid by first. That's actually pretty. That's pretty ballsy, perhaps. I just put it this way.
Yeah.
And so, from your perspective, obviously, you weren't a firm that was defined by complementary strength, I suppose. That's how I see it, at least, and in a shared vision, obviously with my Prius, like you said, and I suppose an hybrid of sort of modernity, but keeping the human side of it, and offering 24/7 services, which I think is also quite interesting. I don't know if that feels that much, but I think to me that would be quite attractive for sure. And obviously traveling for clients and others. I'm really interested, perhaps, in what motivated you, I suppose, both to start your own firm, and how has your different experience, perhaps, and personality complement basically each other when it comes down to delivering a full and complete defense experience?
Yeah. So actually, I started the company first. At the time that I started the company, Med Pueyes was a crown prosecutor, so he was actually on the other side. But we went to university together, and we always stayed very close. And I remember actually, as soon as I became a lawyer, like we maybe have 3 days difference of the day we became lawyers, and I told him, let's go for breakfast, let's sit down and let's plan what our future law firm will look like. And he was like, oh, like I want to work for the crown first. And I'm like, I still want to like vision it and I want to manifest it. And one day, I'm not saying tomorrow, but one day we may have it. And I still have that paper somewhere because now it's so valuable to me. So when I started, I was alone. And like you said, that's kind of like a crazy risk to take. And a lot of people were like, what are you doing? You will have no mentorship. You will be literally by yourself. How are you going to make money? We're not going to lie. We all work to make money. And it's kind of hard to just find clients out of the blue. So I was able to, I spoke about it to my current husband now, and he said, just do it. I'm still here as a safety net if anything happens, but take a risk. And he was the one that really pushed me to just do it. And I rented a tiny office with no window here in Laval in Chaumédé, and I put my name on the wall, and I created like a Google profile, and people started coming in, and something that, because a lot of other people have come to me asking me, how did you do it? And I'm like, I just did it. Really, that's
Right.
short, but it's also, I think, a stroke of luck. Luck is always involved in these types of things, and one client led to another, and then I learned that there was this platform that would link clients to lawyers, because I don't know if you know this, you're actually in the marketing world, but we cannot
Yeah.
market ourselves the way most people can, because we are so like the bar is so strict around what we do. So we cannot do any publicity, really. We cannot tell clients to come see us. It's like it has to come from them, pretty much. So that's how it started, and then I built my caseload from there, and it's pretty much to continue that way. Then after a year of being by myself, I think Met Pueyes was starting to see that it looked interesting and that he wasn't really finding himself as a crown attorney. The values are different.
Sure.
And he only had like a year contract. And when the year contract ended, he said, you know what? Let's do it. Let's get together and start a law firm. So we continued in that tiny a firm, which was a little tiny space, for like a couple of months. And then I found this bigger place in Rosemère. And ever since then, we've been together. So it's been 2 years since we've been together, 3 years that I started the law firm. And yeah, I think you had other questions, but I'm lost now in the
No,
in
well,
what
sure, that's okay. The rest is history,
yeah.
as they say. You said something very interesting. The value, perhaps, obviously, are very different from a crown lawyer than
Yeah.
the criminal defense lawyer. Tell me more about that.
Um, this is a very touchy subject, I think, within our community. Especially here in Quebec, a lot of people. There was this documentary that came out, I think, a couple of years ago about the perfect victim, right? And how the plaintiffs in like criminal cases have to go through a lot of ordeals, and 100% it's true. I agree. But there's a side that people and society is not ready to see, and that's the side of the accused. The accused is completely alone in the world. They have the lawyer, whereas victims or plaintiffs in the criminal system are surrounded by a whole team of professionals, and it's really the state, the force of the state that's representing them. So I think that's where the values start to kind of like diverge a little bit. Also, a lot of people ask me the question of how can you defend someone that committed a crime? How can you defend
Yeah.
someone that sexually assaulted a child or a vulnerable person? And I'm like, And this is the answer that I always give. I'm not defending their actions. I'm defending their rights to a full defense. Everyone is allowed to have a full defense. And most of the time, people come to my office and they are quite honest with me, which is something that I was surprised when I started working in this. I'm like, most people are probably going to lie to me because they're so ashamed of what they did. But no, they actually come here and they are pretty vulnerable and naked. And some of them have told me, yes, I did that and I need your help to get the most reasonable sentence out of this. Not, I need help getting out of this. I think a lot of people are ready to take responsibility for their actions. Whereas when you're with the Crown, I feel like you have this protective kind of like aura. Like a prosecutor wants to protect the victim. They want to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again in society. They have to deter people from doing the same things. And sometimes I personally believe sometimes, not all the time, they get lost in that punitive kind of like mindset, and they forget about the rehabilitation part. And the personality and the background of an accused has a lot to do with why they did what they did. So I think that's where values are really different.
Do you think that the perceptions of what lawyers are, when you think about it from a movie perspective, for example, I just rewatched Devil's Advocate, which is an incredible movie. Do you think that this sort of perceptions, perhaps from a cultural perspective, from a societal perspectives, also come from this, I suppose, like you said, sort of judgments when it comes down to, well, you're doing that only for the money because you're defending somebody that has immoral actions and so on. How much of that do you think is attributed perhaps to how media and how perhaps the news are sort of shared and I suppose spread?
I mean, a lot of it. I think if it weren't because like I'm surrounded by mostly lawyers, but also anywhere I go, let's say I meet someone for the first time and they know I'm a criminal lawyer, I literally see in their face like okay. And they look at my husband like, and they have that question that I told earlier, how can you defend people like this? When I was little, I remember hearing a lot, like, lawyers are crooked. Lawyers are, like you said, just there for the money. Like, lawyers don't care about you. And I think that is true for some. I mean, sorry, but stereotypes do come from certain truths. But I think our generation specifically, and the future generations of lawyers, we are more empathetic and close to our clients than the older generations have ever been. And I see it, like in the courtrooms. I see like some clients come to me because they're like, my lawyer doesn't answer to me, doesn't answer my emails, doesn't give me a minimal emotional like encouragement, and I need that if I want to get through this. So I think that I don't adhere to those stereotypes. I would say I'm very I don't treat my clients any different because of what they did. And most of all, if people think that you become a defense lawyer for money, you're in for a laugh, because most of the time, not most of the time, but a lot of our time is given for free. People need help. People need someone that's going to be there urgently, and people don't have thousands or hundreds of dollars to give out of pocket as soon as something happens, So you need to make a lot of concessions with yourself, but also put a lot of boundaries so people don't abuse from you. But, I'm not here for the money. If I want it, or if a lawyer wants to make money, they should go work for like this big, like, business law firms, like in suits, that's where you make big money and big bucks. But as soon as you speak with individuals that are in vulnerable positions, that's all that luxury and, like what you see in the movies, it's not how it is.
Yeah, to me, you're talking about humanizing, obviously, the accused.
Yes.
And like it is quite taboo. It is quite taboo for sure. And even people that obviously, as my sister is very close to this world, we see it. Basically, there's people in which will push judgments forward about, oh yeah, that's really what you want to do in life. And to me, a lawyer is one actually of the most essential profession there. Actually, I think it's one of the very few essential profession there are. And like you said, for me, I learned this from one of my other lawyer's clients, and he gave me the exact same response. So maybe it's just the way that you guys answer that very sort of taboo question of why you're doing it. But that's exactly right. The person has still a full right for defense, regardless basically of the charge sheets. And that's something that I think we should morally, as a civilization, as a civilization in which strive to also to push forward, perhaps, of not only what is possible but also how we take care of one another. That humanization as a full human being, I think, is something that is extremely important. Now, I suppose you obviously work with first offender. So I think from my perspective, it might be a bit different if you work with second offender, third offender, or whatever you call somebody in which do those repetitively. For you, and I'm gonna ask you a tough question here,
Good.
but for you, I suppose, how do you cross that line with your own value? And is there any basically times where you feel like this is simply too much, perhaps, for what we can handle?
I've never felt that way. I mean, uh, because I guess it's right, because I do deal mostly with first time offenders. The people that come into my office are not the tough guys, like, like what you would see. The Hells Angels don't come into my office pretty much. It's people that um, are very scared and are very, uh, they have a million questions, and they seem very vulnerable to me. Some of them um, do have more of a tough kind of pattern when they speak or what they demand from me. And the thing is, that's when the thick skin applies.
Right.
Yesterday, it was funny because we were speaking with the other people in the office who are not lawyers, and uh, Alex, or your sister, was explaining to them that I yell at my clients a lot. And it's not because I want to be mean to them. It's because it's people that haven't been very guided, so
Yes.
they need someone to put them in their place so they listen, because they don't listen otherwise. So sometimes I feel like a mom. I have to mother people a lot because it's uh, there's things that even if I had a wand, even if I was a witch or a wizard like Harry Potter, even if I wish I could fix it for them, but I can't. And the only way that I can make it better for them is if they work with me, if they work with themselves, in themselves, for themselves, and then maybe we can get a result. So that's a lot of the, but I've never told myself I'm not representing this client because of what he did. The only time I will stop presenting a client is if he is abusive towards me or someone I work with, or if simply I can tell that no matter how much I push for him to go into the right direction, he doesn't want to. And that's the limit that me and Met Pouyes have had the most difficult time putting in front of ourselves, because sometimes we work harder for a case and believe more into someone's innocence than they actually do. And that's
Right.
when we're like, we can't fight your fight alone. So we have to let go of your case.
Yeah, there was this great quote. I think it was Brian Stevenson, if I'm not mistaken, and he was talking about the fact that you are more than the worst thing that you ever done. Right? If
Oh
you
yeah.
reduce anyone to the worst thing that you ever done, all of us are actually not the greatest. And that's what I am a big I'm a big history fan, and I study basically the world and culture so much because I think it's how you understand basically everything. And
Mm-hmm.
truly, even exceptional people or people in which we think are exceptional, when you really come down to it, and again, you go back to that the worst action they ever done, it's reprimandable. It's
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's not criminal, but it's certainly not what you would
Mm-hmm.
consider the moral godlike. And
Exactly.
I think that's why in our system, which I want to spend some time on that for sure, is the presumption of innocence is so important as a guiding philosophy, obviously,
Yeah.
of defense. And at the art, perhaps, of your legal philosophy, again, lies not only these assumptions, but also a mission, like you said, of treating each client as innocent until proven otherwise. And that's why you
Mm-hmm.
go to trial, and that's why you actually
Mm-hmm.
debate it, perhaps, on the big stages. And regardless of what the media or societal pressure basically look like. So, from your perspective, what do you think the presumption of innocence is so sacred in your practice, and how do you uphold, I suppose, that principles with client that may perhaps already be judged harshly by society before even the case began, which I think is a huge, maybe quite a bit of a problem. But I would love to hear your answer on that.
Yeah, so why it's so important, it's because, like I was saying earlier, the who is prosecuting you is the state. There's no stronger and more resourceful thing than the state. And so, and obviously we have constitutional rights for a reason, so that the state has limits. So the presumption of innocence is at the essence of the criminal law system, because if we assume that you are guilty from day one, literally your reputation, your dignity, everything is completely broken, right?
Right.
So that's why we put the whole burden of evidence, the burden of proof has to be on the shoulders of the crown, because they have the resources, they have the police, they have everyone to actually make an educated, not guess, but that you actually did commit an offense, right? And that is actually the job of the defense attorney, is to make sure we are the guardians of the Constitution. If you think about it, like we make sure that the state did not infringe your rights, because the whole point is that you're innocent until proven guilty. However, like you mentioned, there's this new notion. It's not so new, but it's become way stronger with social media, and it's the tribunal of public opinion, right?
Yes.
Whereas as soon as someone's accused of something, it's like they did it. And so, for example, clients that come into my office and they're accused of sexual assault, they've been fired. They have to move out of their house. They cannot interact with other children. Their life changes from day one, even though we don't even know if they did what they did, right? So it's it's huge for someone to have that change in their lives for something that may not even be true. And unfortunately, I feel like society goes into extremes a lot. So
Yes.
I think in this 50s, 60s, 70s, we were in the extreme of, we didn't believe victims of like sexual accusations or conjugal violence, and we needed extra evidence, like only their testimony wasn't enough. And so a lot of people were discouraged from actually going to make complaints about their abusers. And we realized that, and now we're going to the other extreme, where there's we don't need much evidence to found someone guilty. It's almost like the accused has the burden of proving their innocence in some aspects and regarding some infractions and some charges. So I think that's a fight that we're having right now. We need to get into that perfect equilibrium of, we want to encourage victims to come and talk to the police, and we want the legal system and just the procedures to be lighter on them and not take too long. But at the same time, we can't put all of this on the shoulders of one single person represented by one single lawyer. We're not going to lie. If you're accused, let's say someone that has a normal job, they work at IGA, and they're accused of something criminal, it's thousands of dollars that they have to put up to prove their innocence, whereas someone that goes to the police and makes a complaint, nothing comes out of their pocket. It's the state that is representing them. So, yeah.
Do you think perhaps that with those variables, if we both agree on those variables, that we definitely did from the example you gave, do you believe it's too expensive for most people to represent themselves, or what would you say could be an alternative, basically, ways in which we can accommodate for those people, in which again have the rights, the full rights of a full defense, perhaps until proven guilty? How do you juggle that, perhaps, and how the modern world can maybe adapt to those circumstances?
Well, I think there's a lot of, again, within reason, but there's a lot of cases that are open that shouldn't be, that at the end of the day, of course, the criminal, like if you look at the criminal code, let's say, I'll give you an example. An assault can be someone touching you on your shoulder without your consent. That's enough to be an assault.
Yeah.
And they are taking things too literal right now. It's like they're not using their discretion to be like, okay, well, you know what? This is not worth a criminal prosecution, you know? So there's a lot of files like that that keep being opened. Like there are a lot of things like, you know, people threatening each other by social media and stuff. A threat is a criminal thing. So the system is getting full of this little fights between people that before it just used to be settled by the police. Like the police would say, okay, you stop doing that, you stop doing that. That's it. You know, now as soon as we call the police, they have the kind of like the duty to take a claim and bring evidence to the crown, and the crown will maybe authorize it or not. Most of the time they do. And so we're stuck in that circle of people that have not really access to justice, trying to pay lawyers to maybe get their case dropped. And then there's legal aid. So legal aid in Canada is offered, and it's really good for the people. So for the beneficiaries, so like the people that are accused, they get to get legal aid. There's obviously thresholds of salaries for that. So I think if you're a single person with no kids, it's about $30,000 and less that you need to be making per year. If you have a family, yeah, it's a quite a low threshold. And I think if you have a family, you need to make under $50,000 a year, which again, you know, it's not going with inflation and the times right now.
Right. So from your perspective, it's too hard to acquire the necessary resources to have a fair trial for most people.
Yes, which makes that a lot of people are trying to represent themselves right now, and it's very messy because there's things that go with logic, but the law exists for a reason. Like the procedure is there for a reason. So a lot of people get there. You can tell that they're extremely nervous, extremely vulnerable. I don't know if you've ever been to court, Sam, but it's an intimidating setting. You know, there's a judge looking down on you, and there's people dressed all in black, and then they all know what they're doing there. And you're just like, okay, well, I'm going to try to say something. And you get objected every 2 seconds because you're not doing procedure properly, which ends up that the judge literally loses patience because he can't tell you what to do when you're just a particular person there. And he's like, okay, go talk with the crown and try to settle this because we're not going anywhere, you know? So that's what's happening right now. And legal aid doesn't pay the lawyers good either, you know? So private lawyers, like let's say we are a private law firm and we are allowed to take mandates from legal aid to represent people. Well, we kind of pick and choose what kind of mandates we accept because sometimes we can put years into a file and only receive a couple, let's say under $1,000 for a file, which it's crazy, you know? So it's all of this that's making, I think, access to justice a bit more difficult for people.
Right. I want to double down on, well, at least I believe the most iconic quote of the Canadian system, at least for sure, the only one that I know. So let's just put it this way, which obviously is Sir William Blackstone, and my sister repeat that quote to me every 4 days. But it is that it is better basically for 10 guilty person to escape than that one innocent suffer. What's your opinion on that?
Actually, I'm not sure about that, which is funny because I'm a defense attorney. I think it's because I have yet to experience a file where the person is completely innocent, where he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it just happened, you know, like at the end of the day, the police and the crown attorneys do their job, which is a full-on, like, I want to say the word in French, enquête, which that's not what it is, an investigation, sorry.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, there is a matter of evidence there. Even if it's not the best, there's still something there. So, and if not, I'm not going to lie, the crown attorneys, most of them, if they see that their case doesn't hold up, they're not going to pursue it. Sometimes at first look, they're like, okay, this will hold up. Then we have conversations with them where we explain to them the context of what this happened, or we have evidence on our side and we try to negotiate. And they're like, you know what? If we go to trial, I'm pretty sure that I won't be able to, you know, like convince the judge out of a reasonable doubt that this person is guilty of this. So I will drop the file. And it happens quite often. If you were to sit down in, let's say, the Montreal courtroom for a whole day, you would listen a lot that the Crown says, I have no proof to show, because at the end of the day, the person is innocent. So I think in Canada, we're quite good with that. Because of that specific quote, I think that we're very scared to send people to jail. So we don't do it. So I think maybe once in my life, I was very disappointed that we went to trial, and I really firmly believe the person was innocent, but he was not. It wasn't a jail kind of situation, but still, it has consequences, but it's rare. I would say that someone innocent gets convicted.
Interesting. Do you, from your perspective, another challenging question perhaps, do you think that the law in Canada and the sentences that we give to criminal perhaps is too soft or too hard?
That is a good question. The thing is that they're too soft compared to the US. That's for
Extremely soft
sure.
compared to the US.
Because in the US, sometimes I'm mesmerized and shocked about a same case that I would have here. The person would go to jail for years over there, and here's like community hours. I'm like, whoa. I think it's just Canadians. I came to Canada and I realized that Canada is really about giving people chances, second chances. Literally, that is the whole point of Canada. Come here as a refugee, as an immigrant, this is your second chance to maybe have a better life. And so, yes, sometimes, I'm a bit biased by that, because I never want my clients to go to jail, ever. So my whole point, I want them to avoid that. And sometimes I think that the Crown will ask for something that's way too much for something that, for the profile of the person I'm presenting. But if we compare to the rest of the world, we do have soft sentences. If I look at like the 300 cases I've had, however, I would say less than 10% of those people come back into the system, though. So maybe we are doing a good job, and not filling prisons with people, and we like to take the rehabilitation side most of the time. Some crowds have a hard time with that, and I understand, but I think that's what we should do. People that are in these situations did not get help before. Now we're offering the help. They usually get the help, and that's how we make society better. By locking someone up for a few years, you're just putting them together with a bunch of other people that have similar problems, and they get out of there and they had no money, they have a hard time finding a job, so they find themselves in the same situation. It becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it causes states a lot. We spend more on prisoners than on our elders, elderly people. So that's something to also keep in mind. I think for me, and it's always very simple for somebody that is basically not in the profession to see a few cases. And I don't want to sort of paint too much of a broad stroke, but there's a few cases. Obviously, Guy Turcotte come to mind right away, but there's definitely many others that are sort of became iconic in Canada for how, I suppose, unsevere their sentences perhaps were. So I was wondering perhaps what was your opinion on that. But it seemed like when you compare to other places, you would agree that we are softer on consequences perhaps.
We are softer on consequences, but a lot of people think that the defenses, like let's say Guy Turcotte, for example, his defense was that he was mentally troubled. In order to get there, it's the onus on the accused is high. Like, you can't just say, oh, I was depressed and I killed my family. No, that's not how it works. There's a certain criteria and a certain threshold again of mental insanity that you have to actually have lived in that specific moment for you to be completely free of criminal responsibility, right? Like, these offenses are rare, defenses, sorry. And literally, like, the criteria is that you have to be out of touch with reality at that specific moment. And tell me, how difficult is that to prove? Like,
exactly,
you need so many experts, and no one is in someone's mind at that specific moment, So the fact that they were able to prove it to him, for him, was actually spectacular. It's a really good case. And the lawyer that represented him, Maître Poupard, and his brothers are like the biggest, to me, in my heart, but I'm pretty sure for many other Quebecers, are the best criminal lawyers in Quebec, because they're very meticulous about the law, but they're not gonna present a defense that makes no sense. So people, when I talk to people about that case, they're like, oh, well, it's easy then. I'm just going to go steal and I'm going to say that I have a mental issues and that's it. I get out of it. No, it takes so much more than that. It takes a lot. It takes a lot.
Certainly. I think that again, there's a foolishness that comes with the fact that, again, you know so little that you I don't want to paint it too much, too much of a stroke perhaps on that point. But I do believe that sometimes I really feel like you said, like I will look at a case in the US, they'll get 20-year sentence, and then you get something that is similar here, and they get community services. So you sort of ask yourself perhaps how we stand on all of these things. I want you to discuss to us basically a bit more about navigating the legal maze. Perhaps that's how I sort of call it. It's like you said, there's a lot of people which cannot afford lawyers which are representing themselves nowadays. But I mean, the complication that comes with that are very, very numerous, on top of the potential consequences of badly representing yourself, right?
Yeah.
I'm really, I suppose, with your experience across all level, and obviously building trust and guiding clients and each person, I suppose, through a pretty terrifying process, right? And with clarity and strategy, I suppose. I'm wondering, perhaps from your perspective, if you can put it in words, how do you guide your clients, I suppose, through this legal maze? And what is important, I suppose? What do you find the most important things that needs to be in order in this journey, perhaps, to go from accusation to resolution in confidence, perhaps?
I think that my job is to be the voice of reason, because people are completely in their emotions, and some people are actually feel betrayed by someone else. So when I meet them, either in my office or by phone for the first time, I tend to be very realistic with them. You know, there's a lot of lawyers that will tell them, oh, this is nothing, not a big deal. In a couple of months, we'll be quite, no. I'm like, this is serious. And if you don't take it seriously, we're not going to go anywhere. I know, depending on the infraction, I'm like, you need to start going to therapy. You need to start going to rehab. You need to start doing this right now if you want results. And you need to listen to me, even if you think it doesn't make sense. And you need to be available to me as well, because a lot of people, which I guess it's human nature, you don't want to face something that's so horrible, so they avoid their lawyers and they hide. They don't want they don't want to get bad news. So, and sometimes we literally just lose them. Like we have to tell the judge, I don't know where he went. I'm sorry, but I have no further instructions. Sorry. So it's difficult because sometimes it can last a few months. Sometimes it's years, you know, and you actually get acquainted with these people. You see them get married, you see them have children, you see them, they have a whole life while carrying this burden of, maybe one day this will be taken away from me. So I think I feel in my head is really like, I'm holding their hand for a few years or a few months, and I'm not letting go unless they want me to. And I try to make things as clear for them as possible, as not as scary either, because even though I'm realistic, I also try to make them comfortable. And I don't want to be that lawyer that's like stern and serious with them. Like I try to joke around with my clients to have, like, when they come to my office, it shouldn't be like a stressful thing. And I always tell them when they leave, I'm like, we just lived a very stressful conversation. That stress, mentally take it out of your head, put it on my desk, and I'm the one taking it. And you're going home and you're living your life. Okay. And I think that visualization really helps people. And I learned that from my old boss. He said that a lot, and I was like, it makes sense. That's literally why you hire a lawyer, because it's impossible for the person to understand so many things that they're just happy that someone understands them and can deal with it for a while. So yeah, I think that's my approach.
No, sure. And obviously confronting systemic challenges. We talked a little bit about the resources portion of this, but there's also obviously biases and delays, which I want to get into. Obviously, you're a refugee yourself, so you have sort of a first-hand experience on all of this sort of, I suppose, come together. But your work seems to, and you're quite vocal actually about the fact that you push against perhaps those systemic barriers, if you will, and advocating perhaps for not only the clients, but also for a more accessible justice system, which we
Mm-hmm.
just talked about a little bit. I saw this. I think it was in some type of paper, but it was a Canadian. I think it was a lawyer or at least somebody that was in law
Mm-hmm.
discussing about the fact that we tend to treat basically people with basically rich, guilty people better than poor and innocent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the case for many places in society, actually, not
Yeah.
just in law. But I suppose from your perspective, when it comes down to specifically delays and biases, as we spoke a little bit about the financial portions, what are the biggest issues? First of all, why is there so many delays? It seems like I hear delays pretty much every other day
Mm-hmm.
in court, basically in Canada.
Yeah.
So why is that? I suppose, and I suppose, are there any changes or reforms you'd love to see to make the systems again more just and more accessible? And I suppose without those systemic flaws.
I think one of the reasons is, as I was saying before, is a lot of cases that shouldn't be criminalized are being criminalized right now that should not. I understand it's a lot of prevention because of all of the, like there has been really horrible crimes against women in the last few years, 100%.
Oh yeah.
I'm a woman myself, and I understand that. So I feel like unfortunately we're acting a lot out of fear and prevention, which makes the system completely engorged. Like we're trying to protect a lot of women, a lot of children, and men too. Men are victims of domestic abuse, so we tend to hold on to these cases. For example, if you were to be accused in Montreal about domestic abuse, your first appearance, if you're in liberty, if you're released, if you're in the community, would be around 4 months after your arrest. And then on that date, the Crown says, I want to meet with the plaintiff. So we have to postpone 6 months from now because they have to meet so many plaintiffs, and they're only, I don't know, maybe a dozen prosecutors for just domestic abuse. So imagine they have to meet everyone that made an accusation, make sure that they do or not want to go forward, meet with like a social worker. It's a lot of behind the scenes that people don't grasp. Like, and going to court, like, yes, every time we have to postpone a date, the lawyer has to be there. And sometimes I wish we could change that a little bit. If it's just to postpone a date, I think it should be done in writing, let's say. That's what we do with, like less serious cases, like the penal code. Like let's say you get a ticket and you can make it next week then you just write a letter to the Crown and then you postpone it. So I think for certain instances that should be available. However, we are talking about like possible criminals, so we have to get like a tight loose on them. We can't just let them free and write us a letter to when you're ready to appear. So it's very hard to find a middle. And a lot of people come to me into my office and they're like, oh, can this be just dropped because of the Arrêt Jordan? So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
Yes, I am.
Jordan, for those who don't know, is the Supreme Court of Canada said that the procedures were taking too long for victims and for the accused, and so they literally put thresholds of how long they should last. So if it's like a minor summary conviction kind of accusation, it should be 18 months. But if it's more of a serious accusation by indictment, then it should be around 30 months. Okay. However, it's not only the responsibility of the Crown, it's the responsibility of the defense to make sure that things are going in a timely manner. And with that goes the ability of people to pay their lawyer, the ability of the lawyer to reach their clients. It's even if you were to come sit down one day at court, finding a date between 4 lawyers, it's a whole exercise. Are you available on the 15th? No, I'm not. Are you in the 16th? No, I'm on vacation. Are you the judge? I'm not in this. I'm not in Montreal. I'm in Laval. So just to find one date takes 10 minutes, and it's postponed like 3 months from now so that it's available on everyone's agenda. So there's a lot of actors into play as well. So yeah, that's why it takes so much time, a lot of behind the scenes work. Even if some can go faster, and I tell people, I'm like, if you know you want to plead guilty, we're not gonna keep postponing until you plead guilty. We need to be proactive ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch a little bit beyond the courtroom. Obviously, you do a lot of educating and engaging, obviously, with the community, and not only from, I suppose, from where your humble beginnings, I think, support this mission of yours for sure, but with this influence sort of expanding beyond courts,
Mhm.
Daniela, in your role, obviously, as a lecturer and
Mhm.
perhaps to future police officers as well, which was quite interesting. And
Mhm.
I suppose is quite groundbreaking, to be honest. Not only specifically to Quebec, but I think quite groundbreaking periods, and
Mhm.
um and sort of bridging the gap between defense and enforcement, which I think are intertwined in many ways, obviously. And from that perspective, I suppose I think obviously Mandela was talking about the fact that education is the most powerful weapon that exists,
Yeah.
right? And when you think about what's the future of basically what teaching about basically the future to those police officers and the influence that might have basically on your perspective as a defense lawyer and vice versa, how do you I suppose were you once you were starting to do that from the education perspective, did that nuance some of your positions, or how did that, I suppose, sort of reaffirm what you believe or didn't believe basically at such time?
I think I remember the first time I had never been a lecturer before, and I was a bit nervous to be faced with police that probably wasn't going to like me because I'm a defense attorney, and usually they are taught by crowns or people that are on the side of the government. But I was very greatly surprised, and I think they were very surprised as well to see the point of view of the defense, because if you're only on in one path in your life and you never take the chance to see the other side, everything you do makes sense. Everything you do is justified, you know? And it was only by telling them some of the stories of my clients or some of the mistakes that their colleagues have made in files, just because they're so, it's like, it's a weird but understandable excitement of, oh, like this is my first arrest, or like I'm going to arrest someone because they did something wrong, that they forget really basic and important steps not to infringe someone's rights. And then the whole uh investigation or the whole case goes to the garbage because they didn't do the steps properly. So um I learned from them that they have to go they have to face uncertainty and danger in ways that I never could imagine. Like people are like, oh, well, you were in your office with criminals sometimes, or, and the courthouse, there's criminals everywhere. Yeah, but lawyers are always kind of like protected in a way, like there's constables that like the court system is made so that we are protected, but the police is the first intervention. The police is there and they're like naked in front of someone that is maybe going through a psychosis, maybe going, because they have to intervene a lot in mental situations, because let's say someone is at the hospital and they just lose it, like, yeah, they can, the nurses and doctors can try to calm them down, but if they become aggressive, the first people that are going to call are the police, and the police have to deal with things that they were never taught. They're not psychologists or psychiatrists themselves, and they have to deal with extremely difficult situations and chaotic environments and try to make decisions so that the case that they're working on won't get thrown out in court. So it's very diametrical, like the opposite points of view. And I think we were able in my class to see that each other's point of view is completely valid, and that we should actually help each other instead of always trying to see that there's like an adversary kind of mindset there. Because I gave them literally tips on how not to mess up their investigations, and now they understand what our job is and that it makes sense. So yeah.
Right. One of my favorite quotes of all time, and it's actually Voltaire, and he said, and I learned that when I was probably, I don't know, 17, 18. I was reading some old historic book, and he said, I disagree with what you're saying, but I would die for your right to say it. And I think that's
Mm,
that's the beauty basically between this sort of, like you said, emerging these two opposite point of view to say, well, actually, well, first and foremost, we might not be that different from one another. That's the first point. But second of all, in the meantime, perhaps as much as we work together, not only we'll go further, perhaps, but also we'll be able to accommodate for the
mhm.
best outcomes for everybody, basically moving forward. So I think that's
Yeah,
quite interesting. Why do you think that both of you, meaning that obviously yourself and Maître Pouyes, are think it's so important, perhaps, to go above and beyond sort of the, I suppose, the walls of the courtrooms and go to the community and educate, and what does that sort of urge comes in? Why do you think that's so important?
because when we were law students, we still had no idea what the legal system was about. So just think about that. We were literally being trained to become lawyers and we don't know the reality of the thing. Um, we're still kind of like protected, and it's so based in theory that we have this image of what it could be, but we don't know what it actually is. And a lot of people are so misinformed. And look, I love ChatGPT. I'm sure you love ChatGPT. We all love ChatGPT, but people are using this as a tool to defend themselves. And I'm not saying that ChatGPT is wrong all of the time, but there's certain nuances that only humans can understand. And so, like, I feel like it's important to inform people, and also because my job is to protect people from having their rights, their constitutional rights violated. If people are informed about how the police should actually act, or what their rights are, well, maybe we wouldn't find ourselves in these situations. And but something that I do tell people around me, because let's say there's always at parties, someone that's like, okay, so if I get arrested, what should I do? Like, what should I tell the police? So I'm like, that's not what I'm trying to teach you, because I'm not trying to teach you to get away with whatever it is that you're doing. But I'm trying to teach you to respect yourself and the police officer in the situation, but also know that if something is like, if they're not respecting any of your rights, then you shouldn't collaborate to a certain extent, because a lot of people incriminate themselves because they're scared of the authority. They're scared that, like, a police officer is quite intimidating. So they will talk and try to justify themselves. And, but in that specific moment, you're just giving information that you shouldn't have, stuff like that. And a lot of people base what they know on movies and on Hollywood and Netflix. And yes, there's some things that make sense, but it's like, I watch all of Grey's Anatomy, but I can't pretend I'm a surgeon, and a lot of
Yeah.
people think that because they watch all of Suits or CSI or anything that they're really good at law and they know everything. And I'm like, no, it takes a lot of training. And even after 4 years being a lawyer and 10 years of university, I still have a lot to learn. So I can't even imagine the people that don't even have that chance to be educated. So I love to educate people about this, also because a lot of people, I feel like people think of criminal law as taboo, like you mentioned earlier, and I think it shouldn't be. It's not everyone feels like, oh, like if that happened to me, a lot of people would judge me, I will be devastated. And I'm like, I want that stigma to go away. A lot of people just find themselves in difficult situations sometimes, and it's nothing to be ashamed about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very interesting. I think that with the, obviously, with the emergence of social media and the importance of it, like you said, this sort of distributions of, you might say, TikTok, where maybe
Mm-hmm.
one person were able to defend itself with ChatGPT, and then you think you can do the same thing. So there's this sort of over stigmatizations of generalizations of tools, which are still great tools,
Yeah,
but not again, like you said, especially with something as cut dry, or at least can appear cut dry as the law,
yeah,
maybe those nuances should be navigated by a professional.
yeah,
Maybe it is, probably should be. Will
yeah.
probably be the right
Mm-hmm.
word there. I want to talk about the lesson learns and the vision for the future of what justice look like. You just mentioned AI. I think that's definitely one thing that's going to be definitely interesting. But your work obviously reflects hopes in a flawed, but I suppose redeemable system, which I think society at large is facing the exact same thing. It's we all know basically it's flawed. Take the education system, take the medical systems. We all can understand those flaws. Now, obviously, how to practically basically go above and beyond to fix those, that's another big part of the conversations. And perhaps from your perspective, when you're thinking about the lasting impact or change perhaps that you hope to contribute to the justice systems, you have a young career, but I think that you have decades in front of you perhaps, and then maybe my sister can take over, and then we're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 decades. Why not? What do you hope perhaps that sort of, I suppose, impact and change of what you're currently doing, not only from education's perspective, but this sort of humanization of the accuser and so on, can do perhaps mid to long term?
I really hope so. Even, a lot of the lawyers around me are actually, they tell me to be careful when I speak about that. They're like, be careful. Don't, the accuser, they accuse for a reason. And I'm like, I will never, when I've seen something, and to me it's factual, that these people suffer as much as anyone else going through this process, I don't know why we hide it. And I think that my goal is to make people understand, like you said, that to humanize them. These people are not monsters. They're like you and me. They just had a rough time. Something happened, and we need to be more empathetic, more understandable. And the media should also, tone it down a little bit with these people, because
Mm.
they lose everything. And when people have nothing else to lose, that's when they become dangerous, I believe. So I think we're getting to that extreme. And yeah, so I think my goal is, even if I become like this big law firm with many lawyers, that we don't become like, my law firm is not going to be a cold, like there's going to be a wall here and you can't cross it and you're just my client and I'm the lawyer. And no, like, I think we are past that in society, that like weird authoritarian vibe from certain like professions. I think it hasn't served us, and I think we should be closer to with the people that we work with. I mean, without them, we wouldn't have food on our table. And yes, they need us, but we need them too. So I think it should be like a collaboration, instead of like I'm giving you orders to do some things. It's just, I think some people approach it that way, and I don't like that approach.
Understood. When you look into the future, perhaps, how do you see criminal defense sort of changing and evolving? We were just mentioning technology, but is there anything that comes to mind as sort of, I suppose, pillars of what it can look like, I suppose, with this changing world? And like you said, this landscape of, one thing I want to quickly touch on is, as we're seeing a really interesting shift towards old and traditional media to new media as news sources, and as credibility and, I suppose, reputable way of getting informed. Do you think that will basically change the landscape? And I suppose, how would that sort of unfold from your perspective?
I mean, the only way I believe there will be a significant change is really if AI can get to the level of the human experience. Because a lot of people are like, aren't you scared you're going to lose your job? I'm like, no, it's impossible. Like, I think for some aspects of the law, AI can definitely, like, get in there. But as soon as you have to deal with human beings, you need a human face, you need a human relationship. So I don't expect a big change anytime soon.
Okay.
I hope there is change, however, with the access to justice. I hope that there's going to be, again, like, we're going to get into more of a middle ground when it comes to victims versus accused, who has the biggest burden, who has the worst passage through the legal system. I think both people suffer equally, and we shouldn't just look at one perspective. And I think the media should stop only focusing on the victims, even though they deserve it, like 100%. But there's another perspective that we're missing out here. So I think that's what I hope. But I think we're gonna stay like this for quite a bit still.
Beautiful. Well, Miss Daniela Velandia, thank you so much for being on the Meaningful Podcast. I want to end with an extraordinary quote by Martin Luther King, which is a big inspiration for many of us, which is, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Thank you for being so open, honest, and I suppose so easy to discuss with.
Thank you
And I
so
would love
much.
if you can leave our audience with some last words of wisdom, please.
Yeah, well, actually, I think that not only the fact that it goes back to doing things when you're afraid. I think that our generation and Gen Zs and the future generations were overthinkers. And I think we're taking less and less risks. And I couldn't be happier with the risks I've taken so far with my career, with my company, with my employees. And I think we need to get out of this kind of like corporate mindset and be just, everything is about collaboration and community. And I think that also allows you to take bigger risks, because if you know that there's people around you to kind of like have you as a safety net, then again, like you said, just do it. I've never done something and regretted it. I have only grown from it. And I actually used to listen to a lot of Oprah when I was driving in the car long distances, and how failure is necessary. And a lot of people are afraid of failure, but without failure, there's no success, there's no growth. So if I could give someone that piece of advice, then it would be get excited for your first failure.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.